Hello, welcome back to my channel, and this is Cruat Psychology. In this video, we'll be talking about the types of long-term memory by looking at the model answer, outline and evaluate types of long-term memory, which is a 16 marker in the AQA Psychology A-level syllabus. Okay, to begin with, same as usual, we'll look at AO1 and then AO3. AO1 is 6 marks and AO3 is 10 marks, meaning we need to give more weight to AO3 than AO1. So what are the types of long-term memory? We need to be able to explain what they are. We need to go into detail and provide some examples. So let's get beginning. Let's get starting. One explanation of long-term memory is that it is not a single unitary store, but is divided into different types of memory with separate functions. Endo Tuving, so we can just say Tuving, proposed that long-term memory consisted of episodic memory, semantic memory, and procedural memory. These memory systems differ in terms of coding capacity and the type of information they store. All right, so this paragraph is an introduction where we need to say what the different types of long-term memory are, and we'll go into detail bit by bit, one at a time in the next paragraphs. Do we actually need the first paragraph? Actually, not that essential, but it's just good to have as an introduction. We don't need to mention the psychologist's full name. We can just say Toving, or if you can't remember the name, you can say a researcher, or just talk about the types of long-term memory. Okay, so starting with episodic memory refers to a memory for personal experiences and events. These memories are associated with a specific time and place and often include contextual details and emotions. Retrieval of episodic memories involves conscious effort because individuals must deliberately recall the event. Toving described episodic memory as autobiographical memory. For example, remembering a birthday party or a holiday would involve episodic memory. You can see here there is an example. So we want to provide at least one example. No need for too much. No need for a long list. That's not going to give you more marks. You need to say the type of, for long-term memory, we can divide types of long-term memory into either declarative or non-declarative memory. We somewhere in the essay in AO1, we need to say what they are. So episodic would be something about contextual. So does it require conscious effort or not? If it does, then that's going to be declarative. If it doesn't, that's going to be non-declarative. Or either say explicit or implicit. Or if you don't mention those words, like explicit, implicit, declarative, non-declarative, at least you need to say whether or not it requires conscious effort. Okay. And yeah, it can be talked in terms of an autobiographical memory. So you can refer to this as well and provide an example. Next, we're moving on to semantic memory. This is memory for facts, concepts, and general knowledge about the world. Unlike episodic memory, semantic memories are not linked to personal experiences or specific contexts. Semantic memory includes knowledge such as meanings of words, historical facts, or mathematical rules. So I gave quite a few examples here because there's many examples we can talk about, but no need to explain them. This is just AO1. Otherwise, it will be too short for this paragraph if we were to divide each type of long-term memory into one paragraph each. Okay, these memories are usually shared among individuals within a culture and are less emotional than episodic memories. So is it episodic on sorry, is it explicit or implicit, declarative or non-declarative? It wouldn't be well, I'm trying to think about that. It wouldn't be implicit, it wouldn't be non-declarative. So this is also requiring conscious effort as well. And maybe because of that, I didn't put that in here in this paragraph. It's just better to always specifically state whether they are like episodic or not, but I believe it's mentioned at the end. So like yeah, I didn't put it here. At the end, we'll look at this paragraph, like the last paragraph, the last sentence of this paragraph. But before we look at that, procedural memory refers to a memory for actions and skills. These memories involve knowing how to perform tasks such as riding a bicycle or playing an instrument. So it's very short to like talk about procedural memory, same as semantic. We're just saying it's like skills, something we physically or practically achieve or do. Procedural memories are typically acquired through repetition and practice and can often be recalled without conscious awareness. So I already provided examples like riding a bicycle, playing an instrument. Then this bit is essential. We need to like somewhere in AO1, not necessarily at the very beginning, but say which is which. So this means procedural memory is considered implicit, or we can say non-declarative, whereas episodic and semantic memories are explicit because they require conscious recall. So in other words, this means that implicit memories do not require conscious recall. Then AO1 is perfect. I think types of long-term memory for AO1 shouldn't be too hard compared to the other topics in memory. Then AO3, we're gonna evaluate the different types of long-term memory. Before we begin, like what are the assumptions of the types of long-term memory, or do we actually need that in here in AO1? See that I didn't have any assumptions written about the types of long-term memory. I just state what they are. I just talked about like type of information that they store, implicit or explicit, basically just that, and the definitions of each of them, right? So what about the assumptions? The assumptions are actually in here, actually in the introduction. Yeah, I did notice that that was the assumption, but basically the assumption is that each type of long-term memory, they're not like related, that they're different types basically. So they're separate from each other. Just the same idea from multi-store model, working memory model. If you haven't looked at those videos, go and watch them. Yeah, for your revision, see how to structure essays, topics in those ones. Okay, so yeah, pretty much the same idea. For example, that semantic long-term memory and episodic aren't related to each other, or basically they're distinct, they're separate from each other. What I mean here, it's not that because both are declarative or explicit, then it's going to be the same. For semantic and episodic, no, it's not the same. Each type is their own type. So this is why I call it, wait, it is not a single, oh, okay. Don't get confused by this idea. So long-term memory in multi-store model, if you haven't watched that video, go and watch that. Yeah. So long-term memory in the multi-store model is a single unitary store. But then in types of long-term memory, we learn here that there are many types. So that's why it's written here. It's not a single unitary store. But don't get me wrong. The idea of not being a single unitary store doesn't mean that they're like related to each other. No, they're different. Or some might find this confusing. Like basically just understand that it's separate from each other. Doesn't have anything to do with being a single or not a single unitary store. They're just like separate from each other. So yeah, not like about declarative, non-declarative anymore. So if we have like supporting studies that show how like a person from like a case study or from experiments. So for strength, we usually go with supporting studies. So those should support the idea that the different types are different, that they are distinct, separate from one another. We need to describe some detail about the procedure, what happened, in order to explain that and link that back to the question's assumption. Okay, so one strength of the explanation of different types of long-term memory is support from neuropsychological case studies. For example, HM suffered severe memory impairment after parts of his hippocampus were removed to treat epilepsy. HM was unable to form new episodic memories, but could still learn new motor skills, such as mirror drawing tasks. So this is something in the study. I'm gonna call it study because it's case study, so not really an experiment. It's just like HM alone did in the procedure of this study. So we need to explain what this means. This suggests that procedural memory operates separately from episodic memory because one type of memory was damaged while another remained intact. By having one damaged and another normally functioning, right? Intact. Same idea. Shows how they are separate from each other. So we need a linked sentence. Some people say that they already explain why do I not still not get full marks because you need to link back to the question. Have the word long-term memory to be a proper link sentence. Therefore, the case study supports the view that long-term memory consists of different stores. We need to link. This is very important. And then that's it for this strength. As long as we provided evidence, enough detail, then we explain that and we link. This is all we do for gaining full marks in psychology essays in an AQA A level. And another strength, we need another piece of evidence. This time it comes from brain scan evidence. Research using PET scans. Okay, if you only write brain scans, would that be different in terms of marking to like saying PET scans or MRI scans? Would that make a difference? It does. It does because it's a part of the detail from the study. I mean, it's not a topic on biopsychology, on brain scanning techniques, but it's just better to be more specific, be more precise about what type of brain scan. I mean, we're not evaluating brain scan, which is like wanting like the detail to be there. That's all. So don't like write brain scan if you can remember that it's PET scan. And if you can't remember, and some students say, can I make up and maybe say MRI? If you do that, my advice would be to not say Tuving and colleagues. I mean, inventing your own study works as long as you don't put in names of researchers. But if you can't remember some detail and you put in names of researchers and that study exists, the examiner can Google up that study. And if it's not PET, then, I mean, if you wrote MRI and it's PET, so if it's not MRI, then they're gonna penalize like maybe 1 mark because it's like wrong. It's a wrong piece of detail. So if you say MRI, just say by like researchers, a group of researchers that found that da 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 da. Why? Because in this real world of research, it's highly likely that there's a piece of evidence about like using MRIs and finding that there's different areas of the brain active. Yeah, like that it's possible that it exists, but don't put the names in if you're gonna make up studies. Okay, so for PET, Tuving and colleagues, Tuving et al., found that different areas of the brain are active during episodic and semantic memory tasks. You don't need to be too specific about what the task does, what is done in the task, but just say they did it. Episodic memories were associated with activities in the right prefrontal cortex, whereas semantic memories involve the left prefrontal cortex. I mean, if you study other studies or experiments, I suppose you can use that. Different schools use different textbooks, so it's totally understandable to use different studies from other schools. Yeah, and inventing your own studies, you can do that, but don't put in names. This supports the existence of separate long-term memories. We need to explain, maybe the explain part and link goes together by saying that, but you need to remember this correctly, though. I mean, like episodic memories is associated with this and semantic memory, the left side instead. So like this is like more like a fact rather than because it's something biological, you can't like really make your own results up. But I mean, brain scans, we have like MRI, PET, there are several types. So that's fine. But something factual, you can't make that up. Yeah, factual, scientific, that sort of idea. Don't make this part up. So this is one piece of result that shows that different types of long-term memory requires different parts of the brain, which is somehow like mentioned in here, but without the explain part, this supports da 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 da. It's not gonna be full marks just yet. So you need this part. It supports what, why. This supports the existence of separate long-term memory systems. Even though this sounds like it's common sense, and some students would say like, do we actually need this? Can I not write this? No, you actually need it in here. And yeah, because or as you need to explain it fully. So because different types of memory appear to have distinct neurological bases, this increases the validity of Tuving's explanation. Full stop. Okay, so as long as it's super clear, not just put in the results and assume the examiner will understand what you mean, you'll gain full marks when it's fully explained. Okay, so strength would usually be evidence. If you don't use evidence for this topic, for other topics, it might be different. For this topic, no idea about what else can be used as strength. So yeah, we need that. However, okay. Before I go to talk about weaknesses, what else can we use as strength? Okay, interestingly, I put in brackets at the end because I prefer having supporting studies because it sounds like it's a theory. I mean, it's not a theory, but it's the idea that there are different types of long-term memory. So topics, we can think of them as theories. It's better to have like supporting studies to write in strength. If not, if you can't remember up to 2 studies, just think about how each specific topic is useful. And that means it has practical applications. So I'll read this at the end, but apart from supporting studies, we can talk about practical applications. Now let's look at weakness. For weakness, if we have strength, we need strength. We must have strength, but I mean, if you put in like any evidence in the strength, an easy way to gain marks for weakness would be to contradict that strength, either saying it lacks generalizability, ecological validity, or something that can be linked to types of long-term memory. For example, if you say the study is unethical, we can't link it back to say that types of long-term memory is unethical, right? So choosing and using the right ones, the right methodological issues like generalizability or ecological validity could be more well explained in terms of linking it back to the topic types of long-term memory and for other topics as well, because like the topics aren't research, the topics are topics. We can't say the topic is not ethical, right? Or not reliable, or yeah, just use the right ones. So however, unless there's like something in the weakness in the textbook you learned apart from evaluating the studies, you can use those, but I assume there's not really much for types of long-term memory. So I stick with evaluating the supporting studies in here. So however, one limitation is that some of the evidence supporting separate long-term memory systems come from brain scanning studies conducted in artificial laboratory conditions. Okay, quite long. I need to breathe. But I say some. Why? I'm not saying that all evidence are brain scanning studies, right? It's just some, and we're referring to that. For example, in Tuving's PET scan research, so since we mentioned that in the strength, we can talk about that again in the weakness. Participants were asked to perform memory tasks while being scanned, or we can simply refer to brain scanning studies in general that looks at types of long-term memory, and then explain that, like why it's a weakness. This differs from how memory is normally used in everyday life because it's from artificial setting, right? Such as remembering details from a family holiday, recognizing a friend in a crowd, or recalling information during a conversation. As a result, these studies may lack ecological validity. So if this term is not mentioned earlier in the paragraph, mention it here, explain that, meaning or suggesting the findings may not accurately reflect how long-term memory operates in real-world situations, then link. Therefore, the evidence for distinct long-term memory systems may be less convincing than it first appears. So we need to explain. I mean, I keep repeating that, but like, Yeah, every paragraph does that. So we need to do it. We need to say why it lacks ecological validity. We can't just say that it lacks ecological validity alone and let the examiner do that work. No, we need to fully explain everything out. Assume that the examiner is not an examiner. Assume the examiner is someone who wants to study psychology. Examiner is like a student from another subject who doesn't understand all of these key terms. We want to be very, very explicit in writing these paragraphs, especially in AO3. For AO1, there's not really much explained that we need to work on as much as AO3 does. So this is one of the weaknesses. Apart from that, I mean, I mentioned in another video that we need to be selective about what strength or what weaknesses to use, right? Because we're gonna select the best ones to make sure that the examiner has no excuse to penalize any marks. But sometimes there's not a lot of evidence to talk about. Sometimes there's not a lot of evaluation points to talk about in this topic too. So we have like the neuropsychological evidence from the strength. We have like, oh wait, the case study first and the neuropsychological evidence in the strength. Say like from another topic, I did mention that like case studies lack generalizability, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all of the studies supporting the topic are case studies. And this is one of them because they have both experiment and case studies. We can't simply, in other topics that have better weaknesses to write. In this one, there's not a lot. So when there are better weaknesses to use that, because we can't say that like every single topic cannot represent people in the population. But since there's nothing else to really talk about here, this is the reason I evaluated the HM case study and then mentioned that like others are distinct or different to him. So it means that types of long-term memory may not be representative to others in the population. That's what I kind of had the idea here in the second weakness. And that's because there's nothing really much to write about. And we tend to wanna balance both strength and weakness when we can. But sometimes if the evidence leans more towards either strength or weakness, we can go with like 3-1 or 1-3 strength versus weaknesses. If not, try to stick with 2-2. So another weakness is that much of the supporting evidence comes from case studies of brain damaged individuals, such as HM. Although these studies provide detailed insights into memory processes, findings from unusual patients may not generalize to the wider population. Brain injuries are often complex and unique, making it difficult to determine exactly which brain areas are responsible for specific memory functions. This reduces the extent to which conclusions about separate memory stores can be confidently applied to all individuals. And by I mean the population. But because I already had the word wider population in here, I mean, we don't need to always repeat that in the link sentence. Anyway, as I've said, like if there are other better weaknesses to use, then use that. Because we like it doesn't mean like all topics in psychology that have case studies is not representative to others in the wider or just simply population or target population. But yeah, use when there's nothing else to use. Then if for strength we go with applications, we need to be logical and realistic. I mean, sometimes applications aren't in the textbook. Your school might let you like do some homework, some activities, exercises to brainstorm ideas on the applications. But it doesn't mean like all works. It just like you just need to use the best ones that are most related to the topic you're writing about. So this is just an example. So there are other applications too. Further strength is that research into different types of long-term memory has practical applications in understanding neurological disorders. For example, patients with Alzheimer's disease may lose episodic memory while procedural memory remains relatively preserved in the early stages. Understanding these distinctions can help psychologists and healthcare professionals develop more targeted treatments and support strategies. This increases the usefulness and real-world applications of Tuving's theory. So an idea of how like maybe different brain areas are responsible for different types of long-term memory, or how it's useful for treating helping to provide like more qualitative healthcare, more useful healthcare services can be used as practical applications in this topic. Okay, if you have any other ideas on strength or weakness for type of long-term memory, or if you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. And as usual, I hope this video is useful in some way, and I hope to see you in another video. All right, bye.